Gyeongju, a city that holds 1,000 years of history. The cherished values preserved over time have shaped who we are today. Now, through new encounters, we step into a better future. Sustainability, innovation. With the spirit of connection, a new millennium story begins. As APEC and Gyeongju come together. APEC meets Gyeongju.
In our headlines on this Wednesday, November 12th, here in South Korea. Come Thursday, over 500,000 test takers nationwide sit down for an annual scholastic ability test that determines their future academic path. Meanwhile, South Korea adds over 190,000 jobs in October, maintaining its momentum, but employment remains uneven depending on age and industry. Over in the U.S., House lawmakers are reportedly scrambling back to Washington, D.C. for a vote as early as Wednesday on reopening the government. We are now counting down just one day to the annual college entrance test here in the country, with over 500,000 test takers poised to sit down for the grueling 8-hour marathon examination. Our Kim Do-yeon has the latest.
With the annual National College Entrance Exam, or Suneung, just one day away, test takers receive their official exam slips. These slips confirm the subjects the student has selected and the specific test center where they will be taking the exam. Examinees are also being instructed on final test-taking procedures. High school seniors are receiving their slips at their respective schools. Graduates retaking the exam are collecting theirs from designated locations such as district education support offices or specific test centers. Now that they have their test site locations, examinees are advised to visit their assigned centers to ensure they are familiar with the route for Thursday. According to the Ministry of Education, a total of 554,174 people have applied for this year's exam. This is an increase of over 31,500 or 6.0% from last year and marks the highest number of applicants in 7 years. This year's competition for university admission is expected to be particularly fierce. This is largely due to the Golden Pick cohort, students born in 2007 during a baby boom that year who are now high school seniors. Graduates account for 28.9%. Their numbers decreased slightly by 1.2% compared to last year's 21-year high, but it's still high compared to other years. That 2025 spike was largely attributed to a temporary significant increase in medical school admissions quotas. For the 2026 admissions, those quotas have reverted to their original 3,123 openings, possibly stopping some retakers aiming for a medical school place. The rules on prohibited items are strict. All electronic devices, including mobile phones, smartwatches, tablets, Bluetooth earphones, and e-cigarettes are banned from the test site. The exam will be held at 1,310 test centers across the country beginning at 8:40 a.m. with measures in place to cut down noise during the exams and workers adjusting commute times to ensure smooth roads are clear for test takers. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
And the labor market appears to be maintaining its momentum, with findings for October showing over 190,000 new jobs. But as has been the case in recent times, the trend remains uneven depending on age and industry. Our correspondent Moon Ji-young has details.
South Korea saw a continued upward trend in employment last month, but employment losses persisted in manufacturing and construction, as well as among the younger population. According to the Ministry of Data and Statistics on Wednesday, the number of employed people stood at over 29 million in October, adding more than 190,000 jobs.
While the upward trend in employment continued, the pace of increase narrowed as job losses persisted in sectors such as agriculture, forestry and fishing, construction, and manufacturing. Meanwhile, the number of unemployed people decreased, and the economically inactive population increased.
Employment data in the manufacturing and construction sectors remained sluggish. The manufacturing sector shed more than 50,000 jobs in October from a year earlier, extending its downturn to a 16th consecutive month. The construction industry also continued to struggle, losing more than 120,000 jobs to continue its decline for the 18th straight month. On the other hand, the number of employed individuals increased in sectors such as wholesale and retail, arts, sports and leisure, accommodation, and restaurants. Officials attributed this increase to government initiatives, including the Livelihood Recovery Consumption Coupons. By age, older adults primarily led the overall job growth, and while employment also rose for those in their 30s, job numbers declined for all other age groups. Notably, young people aged 15 to 29 experienced the steepest drop, with their employment rate recording its 18th consecutive monthly decline. In contrast, the rising number of economically inactive individuals taking time off to rest was especially pronounced among those in their 30s, reaching its highest level since data collection began. A government official explained that despite their generally strong employment and economic activity rates, fewer people in their 30s were inactive due to childcare or housework, with more now simply choosing to rest. 문지영, Arirang News.
The $1 exchange rate surpassed 1,470 Korean won at one point during trade on this Wednesday. Now, this is the highest level since April this year, when the rate reached 1,487 won against the greenback. The latest dollar rally comes in light of expectations that consumer spending will rise once the longest U.S. federal government shutdown comes to an end, as U.S. House lawmakers prepare to vote on Wednesday in Washington, D.C. In other news, the Lee Jae-myung administration is maintaining South Korea's support for an annual UN resolution that raises concerns over North Korea's human rights situation. Our Kim Bo-kyung explains.
South Korea is backing the UN General Assembly's resolution condemning North Korea's human rights violations as one of the 41 UN member states. This, according to the resolution document released on Wednesday. South Korea continued to co-sponsor the resolution from 2008 to 2018, but under the Moon Jae-in administration between 2019 and 2022, it withdrew, citing concerns about the impact on inter-Korean relations. Seoul rejoined in 2023 under the previous Yoon Suk-yeol administration. There has been speculation that the Lee Jae-myung government pushing for dialogue with Pyongyang would withdraw. But with Seoul's renewed backing of the resolution, this shows the Lee government is approaching the North Korea human rights issues as a matter of universal values and principles. In fact, one official from the foreign ministry reportedly said the Lee government believes it to be important to bring about real improvements in the human rights of North Korean residents, and thus joined the latest resolution as a co-sponsoring country in cooperation with the international community. The U.S., meanwhile, is not among the sponsoring countries as it withdrew from the UN Human Rights Council in February under President Trump. The latest resolution expressed deep concern about the grave human rights violations in the regime, the pervasive culture of impunity, and the lack of accountability for human rights violations and abuses. It also condemned the reclusive state for using resources on military spending and on illegal nuclear weapons and ballistic missile program rather than securing welfare. The resolution will be introduced at the UN's Third Committee before being brought to the General Assembly plenary next month for final adoption. North Korea has strongly opposed the UN's resolutions on its human rights situation, with Pyongyang's foreign ministry spokesperson last year calling it a grave political provocation that violates the regime's sovereignty. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
And North Korea won the FIFA Under-17 Women's World Cup for the second year in a row this past weekend. And for the first time, celebrations took place out on the streets. Following their 3-0 victory over the Netherlands, a recording of the game was broadcast in North Korea the following day. That was Monday evening. On Tuesday, North Korea's state media showed scenes of people cheering outdoors, including crowds gathered in front of a large electronic screen at Pyongyang Station. Now, this is the first time images of public street celebrations have been broadcast. As South Korea sets its sights on building a future fleet of nuclear-powered submarines, a former naval commander turned strategist is calling for greater maritime presence to ensure regional and global security. Our senior correspondent Oh Suneung sat down with him.
South Korea's push to acquire nuclear-powered submarines marks a strategic step aligned with the rules-based international order amid growing regional tensions. President Lee Jae-myung last month asked President Donald Trump for cooperation in developing nuclear-propelled submarines with the use of US-enriched uranium fuel. Trump approved the request within 24 hours, a significant move, according to Dr. Yoo Ji-un, a former ROK Navy officer who has been deeply involved in the Navy's aircraft carrier and submarine programs. He's now at the Korea Institute for Defense Analyses.
It shows that Washington fully acknowledges South Korea's strategic importance as a maritime power and a trusted ally in the Indo-Pacific. U.S. support suggests more than political endorsement. It could mean a closer cooperation in technology, industrial development, and operational planning.
Seoul has stressed that its pursuit of nuclear-powered submarines is not intended to fuel a broader arms race, underscoring that the project's purpose is defensive. North Korea earlier this year unveiled nuclear-powered submarines for the first time, raising alarm within and beyond the region.
North Korea already possesses submarine-launched ballistic missiles, and both China and Russia have been expanding their naval operations around the Korean peninsula. Conventional diesel-electric submarines are limited in endurance and range, but nuclear-powered submarines can remain submerged for months, giving South Korea a credible second strike capability and persistent surveillance presence.
Beyond Seoul's own security, Yoo says South Korea's sea power can fill a critical capability gap in regional security.
The United States likely supports this initiative because it strengthens collective deterrence and burden sharing within the alliance. A capable South Korean undersea fleet would enhance regional stability and complement U.S. and allied naval forces across the Indo-Pacific. Their ability to conduct long-endurance patrols would improve early warning, crisis monitoring, and intelligence collection on potential threats. In addition, these submarines would strengthen cooperation among like-minded allies, the US, Japan, Australia, and European partners, supporting a more integrated, rules-based maritime order.
But this will take time and strenuous effort, requiring congressional and regulatory approval. For now, Washington has expressed optimism about South Korea using its own shipyards. Experts expect around 8 to 10 years for a nuke-powered submarine to be operational, launched in the early to mid-2030s, in line with South Korea's Navy Vision 2045 and the nation's broader goal of achieving a blue water navy capable of global missions. Oh Suneung, Arirang News.
Over in the U.S., House lawmakers are frantically heading back to Washington, D.C. for a crucial vote Wednesday to reopen the government following its longest shutdown in history. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
The U.S. Senate has approved a bipartisan compromise to end the longest government shutdown in American history. The measure passed Monday night by a vote of 60 to 40, breaking a weeks-long political stalemate that left hundreds of thousands of federal workers without pay, disrupted food aid programs for millions, and caused widespread air traffic delays. The bill drew support from nearly all Senate Republicans and 8 Democrats. Those Democrats have pushed unsuccessfully to link government funding to health insurance subsidies set to expire at the end of the year. While the agreement allows lawmakers to revisit the issue in December, it does not guarantee those subsidies will continue for the 24 million Americans who rely on them. Under the deal, funding for federal agencies that had been cut off since October 1st will be restored. It also temporarily halts President Donald Trump's effort to downsize the federal workforce, blocking any layoffs until January 30th. The bill now moves to the Republican-controlled House of Representatives. Speaker Mike Johnson said he aims to pass it as early as Wednesday and send it to President Trump for his signature.
At the very moment that they do that final vote, I will call all House members to return to Washington as quickly as possible. We'll give a 36-hour formal and official notice so that we can vote as soon as possible to pass the amended CR bill and get it to the president's desk.
Meanwhile, President Trump marked Veterans Day on Tuesday at Arlington National Cemetery, where he praised the Senate's action and saluted Speaker Johnson for what he called a big victory, saying the government is now on the verge of reopening after the record-long shutdown.
And congratulations to you and to John and to everybody on a very big victory. We're opening up our country. Should have never been closed. Should have never been closed.
If approved by the House, the bill would then go to Trump's desk to be signed, at which point government agencies would reopen starting at the time Trump signs the legislation. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And back here in South Korea, President Lee Jae-myung has pledged to expand financial autonomy for local governments as part of efforts to promote regional development and balanced growth. At a meeting with the heads of local governments at the Yongsan presidential office earlier on this Wednesday, he announced a tripling of the local autonomous fiscal budget to over 10 trillion won next year. He also called for equal partnership between the central and local governments and vowed to speed up the relocation of public institutions to regions outside the greater Seoul area. Meanwhile, the Presidential Commission on Carbon Neutrality and Green Growth will take part in this year's United Nations Climate Change Conference in Brazil starting Thursday. During the three-day trip, Vice Secretary General Kim Jong-ryul will share South Korea's renewable energy and carbon neutrality policies at seminars hosted at the Korea Pavilion. Kim will also meet with the heads of climate committees from the UK, Canada, Australia and South Africa to discuss a deeper cooperation in tackling climate challenges. The COP30, which began on Monday, will run until November 21st. Starting tomorrow, that is Thursday, until the end of this week, the southern port city of Busan will welcome game makers and game lovers to Expo for an annual exhibition that shares the latest in the industry. Our Pyun Ye-young files this report.
From Thursday, Busan transforms into a global hub for the gaming industry. G-Star 2025 kicks off for a 4-day run under the slogan, Expand Your Horizons, bringing together the world's top developers and publishers. South Korea's leading studios, including NCSoft, Netmarble, and Gravity, will headline the main exhibition hall. Main sponsor NCSoft will take center stage with its upcoming title, Ion 2, and other new global releases, while Netmarble presents fresh games like Solo Leveling Karma and Soul Enchant. The second exhibition hall will feature a global zone with major international players such as Bandai Namco Entertainment and Blizzard. Valve, the developer of Steam Deck, is also returning for this year's Indie Showcase 2.0 Galaxy. Beyond the exhibition floor, the G-Con International Game Conference will explore storytelling and narrative across games, films, and comics, featuring industry icons such as Dragon Quest creator Yuji Horii, Nier Automata director Yoko Taro, and film director Byun Sung-yeon. According to Busan city officials, this year's G-Star will move beyond a festival format to become a global business platform that supports local developers' international reach and strengthens Korea's gaming ecosystem. Traffic around Expo will be partially restricted during the event for safety and crowd control. G-Star 2025 runs through Sunday, showcasing the future of gaming from Busan to the world. Pyongyang, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. A suicide bomber killed at least 12 people in Pakistan's capital on Tuesday, sharply raising regional tensions. The blast occurred outside a court complex in Islamabad around midday, wounding 27 others. Officials say the bomber tried to enter the building before detonating the device near a police vehicle. No group has claimed responsibility, but Islamabad says militants based in Afghanistan orchestrated the assault with support from India, charges that both countries deny. Pakistan's defense minister said the country is now in a state of war and vowed to respond if cross-border attacks continue. A Turkish military cargo plane carrying at least 20 people has crashed near the Azerbaijan-Georgia border. The C-130 aircraft was flying from Azerbaijan to Turkey on Tuesday night when it disappeared from radar and went down near the Georgian town of Sinhagi. Search and rescue teams are at the site, but officials have not confirmed casualties. Turkey's president has offered condolences to the families of those on board, calling them martyrs. Georgia's aviation authority says the plane issued no distress signal before impact. A Chinese woman has been sentenced to more than 11 years in prison in London for laundering billions of dollars in Bitcoin linked to a massive fraud scheme. 47-year-old Qian Dimin pleaded guilty on Tuesday of using stolen funds from more than 100,000 Chinese investors to buy cryptocurrency, now worth about $6.7 billion. She fled to the UK in 2017 and lived in a mansion in North London, where police later made one of the world's largest crypto seizures. Football star Lionel Messi has spoken about his emotional return to Barcelona and his uncertain World Cup future. While training with the Argentina national team in Spain, Messi visited an empty Camp Nou, saying he misses the club, quote, with all his heart and hopes to live there again one day. Messi added he hasn't decided on playing at the 2026 World Cup, admitting, quote, I don't want to be a burden. I'll only go if I can help the team. 주지한, Arirang News.
This morning, a day before the National College entrance exam, some inland areas and mountainous areas had cold below 0 degrees. Daegwallyeong started cold at minus 5.7 degrees Celsius and Pongan County at minus 3.5 degrees. The cold mornings will continue tomorrow as well. For Suneung Day tomorrow, mild conditions far above the average for the time of year will be seen, with the daytime high rising to 17 degrees in Seoul. However, as it will be chilly in the morning and evening, test takers should wear warm clothes to control their body temperatures. Seoul will start off at 8 degrees tomorrow, Gwangju and Daegu at 6 degrees. Daily highs will rise up to 18 degrees in Daejeon, Gwangju and Gyeongju, 20 degrees in Busan. Next week, the temperatures will drop sharply and the cold will come again. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Right, those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session, and today we cover a mayoral race in an American city that has been making global headlines.
자연으로 다시 돌아간다.
이게 그 신발이구나.
100% 생분해되는 신발입니다.
야, 너무 신기하다. 엄마커즈 검증 타임. Let's go.
저기 걸으면 이렇게 압력이 나올 거예요. 그래서 실제로 얼마만큼의 힘이 들어가고 스트레스를 몸에서 받는지도 다 측정을 하는 것이죠. 그래프를 보시면 달리기를 하고 근육의 활성도가 피로도가 왔기 때문에 떨어졌고 이제 리커버리 신발을 신고 휴식을 취하고 난 뒤에 데이터를 보시면 짧은 시간 안에 근 활성도가 현저히 증가한 것을 확인하실 수 있습니다. 그럼 결론적으로는 피로도가 리커버리 되었다.
Officially certified by the American Orthopedic Association and attracting global investors left and right. Finalists at the world's largest outdoor trade fair. How about a fast post-run recovery?
How to survive in Korea. Workplace. Step 1. Lunchtime. The most important morning routine is to check today's menu. Food is essential for survival. Memorize today's menu. The highlight of office life. Lunchtime. Rice in the bottom left, soup in the bottom right. The top is for the sides. The sauce and the spoon go here. This is the basic layout, but it's a bit odd to switch rice and soup. When you're done, pour the leftovers into the soup bowl. It doesn't look that appetizing, so wait until others are done eating. Step 2. Neng, nep, nenep. These are the most used expressions at work. Choose the most appropriate form. Neng, nep, nenep. Remember that the formal ne can sound a bit stiff. Did you just say yes? Absolutely not acceptable. You want to find the right word for the right occasion. Step 3. Desteria. Desteria is the oasis in the desert. Show them your character. If you're not the diligent type, get a stooky plant. Work is tough. Laugh and the whole world laughs with you. Weep and you weep alone. Stay put like the stooky that survives in the desert. Hang in there until the end. Of course, you can always quit. You matter more than anything else. Step 4. Survival kit. Every worker needs a survival kit. Survival kit level 1. This position gets the most exposure. Grab one when you need a sugar boost. Always keep a few treats you can offer your co-workers. Survival kit level 2. These are for hunger pangs before and after a meal. You'll need them when you take a coffee break with your office buddies. Survival kit level 3. Trash talking your boss with your soulmate. Did you survive in the workplace? Office romance? Be careful. Even the photocopier knows all the gossip.
재미없을까 이제 나도 모르겠어 I don't know what to think about but you I come by you 오해서다 아름다운 날 보내기는 싫어 그럴 수만 있다면
City is looking to usher in its youngest mayor in over 100 years, who has pledged to address the concerns of working-class voters for an affordable life in the Big Apple. With more in Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective for this Wednesday, November 12th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. Zoran Mamdani, the 34-year-old democratic socialist who won the latest mayoral election in New York City, has been making headlines in many ways. He's poised to become one of the youngest in over a century to hold the post of mayor in New York City. He'll also be the first Muslim mayor and the first New York City mayor to be born in Africa. For more, I have Fabian Kretschmer with German press agency DPA here in the studio. Fabian, welcome back.
Very pleased to be here.
I also have Rui Valdez with Spanish news agency EFE Spain, live on the line. Rui, welcome.
Nice to be here, Sonny.
Right, Fabian, let's start here in the studio. Let's begin with the global media coverage of Mamdani's election victory. What has been the focus of the coverage here in South Korea and perhaps over in Europe?
Yeah, I found the coverage actually quite interesting. I think Mamdani is a figure that, as a psychologist, they would call it maybe an object of projection, because you can project a lot into this political figure, and the reporting often tells you more about who is reporting than the subject itself. What I mean by this is that among the left-leaning press, the coverage really differed quite a lot than compared with the conservative press. In South Korea, for example, the conservative press would be represented by Chosun Ilbo, for example. That would be a classic representative, and they were more skeptical towards him. I mean, they were skeptical about some of his ideas being a little bit like Soviet-style socialist. I mean, the accusation was not was always in the undertones a little bit. So they also questioned, can he, with his inexperience, can he really implement all his populist pledges? So there was really a lot of skepticism. On the other hand, the Hangyeore, like a left-leaning paper here in South Korea, they were like praising him, that he's a populist in a positive sense, that he's listening to the people, that he's really having an ear to the street and basically takes care of the real need of the working class people. So you can see quite some difference. And in the European press, it's exactly the same. Maybe there's some special aspects to it. For example, in German media, especially in the conservative media, they questioned his, or they had a lot of doubts about his previous past of being very critical towards Israel. I mean, that's a very sensitive issue in Germany because of the dark past of Nazi Germany. So basically, Germans are very skeptical if someone is, for example, trying to boycott Israel, and that maybe we come to this aspect later. He's very critical to the government in Israel. And the left press in Europe is praising him as a messiah, really as a figure who could save this country. I mean, there's a lot of positive coverage. Why? I think because many journalists in Europe have a dislike for Trump, and Mamdani is seen as a hero that could challenge Trump.
Right, and staying with this, Rui, what can you tell us about the coverage of Mamdani's election victory in Spanish-speaking countries?
Yes, actually, it was very interesting to listen to Fabian because the perspective, well, of course, many of the characteristics that of Mamdani that the Spanish language press is focusing are similar to what Fabian has mentioned, but there's also a part that I can understand what he says when from Europe he might be not seen that extremist to the left, no? As a democratic socialist, he would share many ideologies or policies or proposals that you can compare in main countries in Europe. But for the US, this profile is a little bit more extreme, to put it in relative terms. And when it comes to Spanish media, the focus, of course, is not as much in that part, but it's more about the profile of this working class, pro-immigration personality that connected a lot with Latinos, with the Hispanic communities in the U.S. So many of the focus have been on that part, in the sense that through his policies, he was able to, let's try to separate first. When we talk about Donald Trump or Donald Trump administration, we are not talking about a strong capitalist right wing. They have many protectionist measures, as we know, with tariffs and so on and so forth. But when it comes to civil rights or or human rights or these types of topics, he would be clearly conservative. While Mamdani has this progressive part of subsidies, of anti-discrimination or pro-immigration, but at the same time, it not necessarily has, let's say, a free market economy ideology, at least for the city of New York. Another part that the Spanish language press have been focusing is in his recent visit to Puerto Rico. He gave a speech in this event organized by Somos, which is a nonpartisan forum that participates New York and Latino leaders. And there he was able to link this famous slogan of Puerto Rico that in Spanish goes, Puerto Rico no se vende, which means Puerto Rico doesn't sell out, and put it to New York. He was also very, let's say, the press or people notice Mamdani a lot because during his campaign, he exposed in his advertisements, many of them were in Spanish, or if you wanted to get information about his campaign, it was in Spanish. Of course, in a more or broader sense, Spanish-speaking media has always also covered his clash with Trump when Trump has made threats to arrest him if he takes out a video of ICE related to the raids, immigration raids, and to defund him. And Mamdani's reply that the president's threats are only threats and not the law. And there is a specific episode also in Latin America that Argentinian President Milei, after Mamdani won the election, he said that socialism has entered the U.S. via the East Coast. Of course, we know Milei, he's a self-proclaimed libertarian and has these ideas. So, well, that reaction was also widely covered from Spanish-speaking media.
Right, I see. And Fabian, before we progress any further, tell us a bit about who Zoran Mamdani is and a bit more about his pledges while on the campaign trail.
Yeah, happy to do so. He has a very interesting biography. He's born in Uganda. And he has actually Indian roots, so his parents are of Indian descent. He's Muslim, and I think his upbringing is quite interesting. As a child, then later he moved to New York, and his parents are quite some renowned intellectuals. His father is a professor. He also taught a couple of years at Columbia University. He also taught at a lot of African universities and research, like post-colonial studies. His mother is a very prestigious movie maker. So there was also a little bit the accusation that he's a so-called silver spoon socialist. Well, you make of that what you will, but he's definitely not from a working class background. He comes from a, I would say, slightly elitist background, but compared to other politicians, I would say it's also relatively down to earth. He studied Africa studies. He was actually, during his younger years, rapping. He was a rap artist, and I can only encourage viewers to maybe look that up on YouTube. You find some videos, actually some quite funny videos. And he also joined the BDS movement. That means boycott, divest, sanction, and that is a movement that basically, is against the Israeli government. So he was already from a young age very critical to Israel's policy, for example, in Gaza. His pledges are quite down to earth and simple. He has simple messages. He talks like a real human being, not like a typical politician. And his main concern is the affordability for average citizens in New York. New York has become a city where housing is extremely expensive. Also, like simple things like health insurance, etc., become unaffordable for many people. So he wants to have rent freezes, so basically making renting more affordable. He wants free kindergartens, free education, etc. Those things that critics say are very socialist in a negative way, but actually from a European perspective, maybe we can talk about that, are actually quite reasonable. And I think those pledges resonate for the people because he was really actually known during his campaign to go out on the street, also go to areas where he's not necessarily popular and listen to the people and basically take the messages from the people. He said that I'm not a president for my own agenda, I'm a president for you, so I serve the people. That's his message, and I think it's relatively credible.
Right. Roy, what has the American media been highlighting perhaps as the reasons behind Mamdani's election victory?
Well, in a nutshell, they have mentioned that his triumph is equivalent to grassroots affordability revolt. Many mentioned that it's he took, or well, not he took, but the same as Trump, but very similar outsider narrative. But as I mentioned before, this time is progressive, especially in topics like gender or immigration, etc., etc. One of the main keys, as Fabian was mentioning, was, yes, that he was able to connect with the youth energy, digital creativity, and set himself as different as the common politician. But mostly what the media is taking as one of the main reasons that his narrative or his proposals were so appealing was that he, in his message, affordability trumped all. This means this is very connected with his slogan that it was a city we can afford. So he made promises to reduce cost of living, cost of housing, and improve childcare, and also they reduce crime and improve safety, of course. They say the message consistency was also important. He was a very good communicator and very clear on what he wants to get. It's quite interesting also, as we were talking, how disconnected a lot with the working class, and also in a city like New York, where it's multicultural, this new image really contrasts the image that Donald Trump has as a president right now, no? So, so one thing he proves, or the media is saying he proves, is, again, that experience doesn't matter that much for the voters. Of course, Mamdani will face many challenges as he's the youngest mayor ever and the first Muslim mayor in New York. But at the same time, it seems that people are desperate to look for someone new. And even though Trump played this card, when he became a president as an outsider, he's almost 80 years old, the previous president was even older than him. So for many, Mamdani is representing this new wave, this new generation of politicians that found new ways to connect to the youth, which was a big chunk of their voters, and also to a new reality, or I don't want to, let's use another word, maybe it's not a new reality, but the people that feel that are getting left out with this new administration in the U.S., this Republican administration, in the sense that, as we can see in the results of the voting, one of the other main news is that Republicans are losing a lot of the Hispanic votes and Latino vote, which was very important for them in the latest elections. Now, this happened all across in the victories of the recent victories of the Democrats. So yes, what they are saying is that Mamdani found a way to become appealing for these ethnic groups that supported, historically, many of them, or a big part of them, supported the Republicans. So he's seen as a window of hope to the Democrats, and also it remains to be seen if the Democrats will adopt this new style or more modernized or updated style of politics that Mamdani is showing.
Right, that is something up for debate, of course. Fabian, Mamdani has called himself a democratic socialist. For the sake of clarity, do tell us a bit about the definition for democratic socialism, and what does New York City's election of Mamdani tell us about the city's priorities moving forward?
Yeah, so The term democratic socialist might evoke a lot of negative images, especially in the US. You have to see it in the context of the country. The US has a very strong anti-communist history, and when the average person thinks that someone calls himself a socialist, then he or she would think about North Korea, China, Soviet Union. And I think it's important to really clarify what the term means, because socialism, does not equal socialism. There's really a lot of differences, and it gets very complicated with all those autocratic regimes that I just mentioned. China, for example, in some ways, there's a lot of Manchester, like really hardcore capitalism. And if you want to start an independent labor union, you go to jail. On the other hand, you have a socialist or like a Leninist-style communist party who governs this country. So does socialism apply to this country? Maybe not, but what democratic socialist means has nothing to do with all those autocratic regimes. Democratic socialism is committed to a free society, a free system, but states that capitalism alone cannot be the answer, and also that the free market has to be regulated to a certain degree. For example, when it comes to housing, healthcare, education, public transport, those kind of things. So capitalism needs some regulation. I think that's one of the arguments that many democratic socialists make. Well, in the context of the US, it's very obvious that you have the strongest economy in the world, but that has obviously a lot of economic problems, especially the high inequality. But very fundamental needs are quite unaffordable now. Also, as someone who lives in South Korea, it's quite obvious with the Americans that I talk to who live here in South Korea. Often when you ask why they move here, one of the things that they really like about South Korea is that it has affordable healthcare, for example. It has public safety is good. The subway system is very good. All those things that actually lack in the US. Why? I think because it is quite hardcore capitalist in some ways. At least from the perspective of a democratic socialist, that would make sense. Mamdani makes pledges that basically wants to make living more affordable, wants to tackle the power of the tech billionaires. It wants to have a more even distribution of wealth between, the rich and the lesser privileged people. Maybe you might think about Bernie Sanders. I think he was also a kind of democratic socialist. He, in 2016, he almost won the vote among the Democratic Party for the presidential election. In the end, Hillary Clinton won it, and she lost to Trump during his first term. Many people say that actually someone like Bernie Sanders might have had a chance against Trump during his first term, because Bernie Sanders was also someone who, took the need of the people and basically addressed it. Because that was a lot of criticism in the last years, that the Democratic Party became quite elitist and lost the connection to its roots. Also, that they didn't really know much what the working class was dealing about in their everyday life. What are their problems? And I think in New York, all those problems that I just mentioned are really much more extreme than in most other cities, because you have to be really rich to afford a decent house. It is really quite an expensive city. And then you can ask the question, okay, even you earn a lot, but actually your living standards might be lower than in other areas that are actually less developed economically. And I think those are the problems that a democratic socialist wants to tackle.
Right, and Bernie Sanders, of course, is one of the few Democrats who's openly endorsed Mamdani, of course, and congratulated him on his election victory. Now, Rui, our Fabian here in the studio, talked about how the Americans he came across here in South Korea have spoken about the affordable health care here in South Korea is one reason why they live here. Dispute over health care between Democrats and Republicans in the U.S. have partly led to the shutdown that we saw the federal government, the longest one in U.S. history, of course. Could you tell us a bit more about that shutdown and the prospects going forward?
Yes, the record-long shutdown that began in October is nearing an end after the U.S. Senate passed a bipartisan bill, 60-40 in the Senate vote. I'm going to try not to get too technical with my answer because, well, this has a lot of details that might be, well, for another show. But in general, what we have as the core is that, yeah, there's hope that this shutdown finally is gonna end. But still, what the Democrats were asking, which was to preserve ACA health insurance subsidy extensions, it was only as a final result of this signature of this bill, it's only as a promised revision, but it's not a win. What this means is that this issue, the health insurance subsidy extensions, will be revised again by the end of the year. So even though the shutdown might end, this does not mean that the Democrats will get away with this demand that they have that they had in terms of health insurance subsidies. Still, as we saw all over the news, this shutdown created a stop that sorry, I just heard something in the thing. That created like furloughs and unpaid work of 1.4 million federal workers stopped without paying, while some institutions were still running in Social Security, Medicare checks, and law enforcement. There was this big threat that air traffic controllers were working unpaid. So this caused flight delays, some cancellations, and there was even the fear that there was going to be a massive shutdown of flights as a result of these shutdowns. In terms of the economic impact, the analysts estimate around 0.1, 0.2 percentage points of GDP loss per week. And this, as I mentioned, started since October. So in a nutshell, there's hope for this to end. It still needs to be passed by the House and signed by President Donald Trump. And the main issue that the Democrats were asking was not resolved.
Right, but the U.S. House, of course, is set to vote on whether to open the government again on Wednesday. Right, Rui, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts today.
Thank you very much.
Fabian here in the studio, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
All right, that ends this edition of Press Perspective. As always, thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow.
필라테스 기구는 전 세계에 4가지 기구가 있습니다.